Nutrition for Kidney Health. My name is Jen Stoudenbauer, and I am the Director of Development for UCI's Nephrology, Hypertension, and Kidney Transplantation Division. First and foremost, I hope you and your families are keeping well and healthy, especially during this uncertain time. UCI, as you may know, is the only academic medical center in Orange County and has pivoted very quickly to be at the forefront of COVID-19 research, really keeping true to our mission of discover, teach, and heal. Our hospital and university teams have been identifying insights and data around this virus so they can work off their findings to provide the very best patient care to our community and beyond. Today, you are going to hear from UCI health experts within our nephrology, hypertension, and kidney transplantation division as they share more about the incredible advancements and research around nutrition for kidney health. Please note that all participants have been muted, and if you have questions or feedback at any time throughout the presentation, please let us know by using the Q&A feature in the lower navigation bar. We'll respond to your questions at the back half of the presentation. To kick us off, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Kalantar. So Professor Cam Kalantar is a triple board certified physician. He studied medicine in Germany, and he has also received a master's degree and an additional PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, and a nephrology specialty at University of California, San Francisco. Under Dr. Kalantar's leadership, UC Irvine Nephrology has been named twice among the top 50 nephrology centers by the US News and World Report out of over 1,700 nephrology centers nationwide. Dr. Kalantar has been recognized by several prestigious best physician directories in the US, and since 2014 has been ranked among the top 10 experts in chronic kidney failure out of over 90,000 experts ranked throughout the world. He has published over 800 scientific articles, many chapters, 3 textbooks, and has presented at over 500 invited talks and lectures in national and international conferences. He is a world-class expert in the management of chronic kidney disease, and he is one of the very few clinician experts in this country and in the world who has been invited 3 times to write review papers for the New England Journal of Medicine, the world's most recognized journal of medicine. UCI Health is so thankful to have him, and I'm pleased to turn the presentation over to Dr. Kalantar. Okay, you know what? Dr. Kalantar is having some issues with login, it looks like. So we are going to skip his portion of the presentation and try to get him back on. And Dr. Ree, are you also there?
Yes.
Okay, let's jump forward because we lost Dr. Kalantar, and I don't know if someone on the login side can help him out. But Lori, if you want to share your screen and advance to Dr. Ree's slides, please. Sorry, we're advancing through. Okay, he is back.
Great.
Sorry about that, Dr. Kalantar. You did get kicked off. So if you want to start your video.
Yes. Thank you very much. Sorry about technical challenges right at the beginning. And
we're going to get your slides up too in just a second.
You. It's slide number 3.
Yes. Okay, there you go.
Great. So thank you, everybody, and my apologies for technical issues and challenges. We have been here together in this virtual world for 6 months, but it never, there is no single day where we don't have some of these unexpected issues. So with that, I would like to welcome everybody. Thank you, Ms. Jennifer Stoudenbauer, for hosting today's event. My name is Cam Kalantar, and with colleagues here, Dr. Connie Reed, Dr. Wei-Ling Law, Ms. Sherry Schulman, and Dr. Amanda Brown, would like to spend a few minutes. Let's move to the next slide. So these are textbooks related to and publications related to nephrology and kidney disease. So you may or may not know that Division of Nephrology, Hypertension, and Kidney Transplantation, UCI, is a world-class center. And while UCI is quite renowned for many things, nephrology at UCI is yet an entity that's not only nationally renowned, but world renowned. We have patients who fly from all over the country and the world actually to see us here and stay in these hotels around us for consultations. And sometimes Orange County people, I mean, when something belongs to your backyard, you don't take it very seriously. But this is, I would like to encourage everybody to put UCI nephrology, UCI, my name counters, just put it in Google and see what you see. And you would be surprised what a national and international reputations we have and why we have medical tourism for kidney health. Next slide, please. So as COVID started 6 months ago, which is also known as coronavirus, these are some of our contributions about what to eat, especially if you have kidney health, you're concerned about kidney health or kidney problems. And also shown in the next slide, just another example that suggests that changing the microbiome and gut microbiome could have an impact on the severity, prevention and severity of COVID. So I think that's good enough having touch base on COVID. I'm going to move on to the next slide. And this is essentially what I would like to share with you a few things for 8 minutes. Next one. It's about plant-based, plant low-protein diet. Next slide, please. So this is glomerulus. This is the function or functional unit of the kidney. As you see in the next slide, since it's too complex, I've essentially simplified this into blood entering the glomerulus, blood leaving, and part of the blood being oozed out. Whatever is being leaked or oozed is called ultrafiltrate, which becomes urine. Now, usually this glomerular filtration or leakage is happening around 100 cc's per minute. That's why we said the unit is 100 cc's. If you go to the next slide, you will see essentially here that this very fine structure, we have 0.5 mm to 1 million in each kidney, must remain very well taken care of. Blood pressure within glomerular tuft needs to be well controlled. If blood pressure goes up, each time you eat a lot of steak and meat, blood pressure goes up inside that place. It's called glomerular hypertension. Then we need to lower it, because if you have damaged kidneys, that could cause harm. Now in next slide, as you can see, it shows that loss of nephron happens because of high blood pressure, and then high blood pressure requires more nephrons to increase blood pressure to compensate. That leads to more loss of nephrons or glomeruli, and then it goes to the vicious cycle. So in order, and then that leads to essentially what we call progression of CKD. Therefore, it's very important to lower blood pressure, not only in the entire body, but inside those glomeruli, inside those very sensitive capillaries. So next slide shows here what we do right now for those who are eating a lot of steak and meat, and meat becomes amino acid and opens up the entry to the glomerulus, and blood pressure goes up, and a lot of urine is generated, for example, or a lot of glomerular filtration rate, which is good short term, but in long term it's going to hurt. It's like a car, you're using a lot of wear and tear. Next one. Now, for those who haven't started eating, this was supposed to be a little bit tighter, that showing that when you don't eat, the entry to the glomeruli is tightened and is smaller, and less blood goes to the glomeruli, and glomerular filtration rate goes down. Next one. And essentially, this is what happens when your glomerular filtration rate gradually goes down over a matter of years, and gradually we start, if something happens, for example, you're not careful, the kidney function gets worse, but it goes back to its baseline. But over a matter of 4 to 5 years, you reach the lowest level, which is less than 10%, and then we need dialysis. Next slide. And therefore, this is essentially what we call chronic kidney disease stages. Stage 3, 4, and 5 is what we usually detect by measuring your creatinine. Stage 1 and 2 are usually based on protein in the urine. Next slide. Now, usually everywhere you go, including USC and UCLA, and these are great places, but sadly their nephrology center, their nephrology is actually not bad at all. It's like community nephrology, like St. Joseph Hospital, Hoag Hospital. These are great people, and these are my friends. But if you want a world-class nephrology that is kidney health, this is the one that we provide you, because we not only measure creatinine. Creatinine is just a muscle mass surrogate that we use to calculate your kidney function. Next slide. We also use something called cystatin C. For us, this is drinking water. People don't even know what it is, how to order it. They say, well, it's very expensive. It takes several days. We order it, and we have implemented in 1 to 2 hours, we have the results. And that adds to the accuracy of assessment of kidney function. This is what we do. Next slide. And the management of kidney diseases, people always ask me, can you cure my CKD? I'm saying, no, I cannot cure it. Can you end it? Can you stop it? And I said, maybe if we work together, but probably not. But then I said, we can work together to slow down, so that when the community nephrologists in LA, in UCLA, USC, everybody says that start dialysis, I'm going to tell you, work with me, work with us. We may be able, we are not sure, another 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And that's why people fly to see us. Next one. So this is essentially what we would like to do. That means as your GFR, glomerular filtration, is going down over time, and they say by 2024, 25, you need dialysis, we start here working with you. And then gradually, as you see, we can give you longevity of the kidneys if we can, because it's a science. We don't have magic here. And with things that we're going to share with you. So I think that my slides are done. Next one. And these are, for example, for those who know, New England Journal of Medicine is a renowned journal. It's probably #1 in the entire planet. And we at UCI, we have published several papers. That means they invite us to write how to manage kidney disease for doctors. That means we train nephrologists. Half of the nephrologists in Orange County and many of them in LA, they are trained by us. And this is one of many things that we teach nephrologists. And then the UCI models goes all over Orange County, Southern California, and nation and the world. Next one. So I think I talked too much and it was too much bragging. Therefore, I'm going to stop here and stop talking too much about the UCI. Now I let you guys see the real investigators, scientists, clinicians, and people who have contributed to changing the world of kidney health. Our first presenter is Dr. Connie Reen. She's world class. At this young age, she's associate professor, and she has changed the world by the entire world, the entire nation, and the world is looking up to her to see how they learn. I mean, I go to meetings and they say, wow, you work with Dr. Connie Reen, how does she look like? I mean, for them, she's like a star. And for us, we take her for granted. She's yet another nephrologist seeing patients. She has expertise also in the criminology. So now in 7.5 minutes, she's going to share with you what she has. Dr. Connie Reen.
Well, thank you, Dr. Counter, for your extremely generous introduction. I really think Dr. Counter for his wonderful presentation, and who's also been a long-standing mentor for me for almost a decade. So I'm a practicing nephrologist, as Dr. Counter mentioned. I'm really excited to see some of my patients on the call today. And I also do a lot of research. So it's my privilege today to talk to you about kind of the intersection between my research and also the clinical care of kidney disease patients. So I'll be talking to you about nutritional management for diabetes and chronic kidney disease. Next slide. And so just for those of you who have more interest on hormonal disorders and kidney disease, which are very common, we actually had a textbook that was just published last year. So if you have interest, it's actually available on Amazon, but you can approach me and just contact me if you'd like to get some more information or have a copy. Okay, next slide. So hormonal disorders are very common in kidney disease. Diabetes is probably one of the most prevalent conditions we see. Also thyroid problems, testosterone disorders, and mineral bone disease. In addition to that, nutritional management has to be tailored differently in patients who have underlying endocrine disorders. Next slide. So one of the most important disorders that we have to think about in kidney disease is diabetes. So as many of you guys might already know, diabetes is one of the most common conditions in the US population, affecting over 30 million US adults. Next slide. And there's a strong interaction between diabetes and kidney disease, such that chronic kidney disease is one of the most common complications of diabetes. And unfortunately, diabetic kidney disease is the #1 cause of end-stage renal disease in the United States. Next slide. This is also relevant because patients with chronic kidney disease who have diabetes have a much faster decline in their kidney function over time. Next slide. So to really combat and attack diabetic kidney disease, we really have to have a multi-pronged approach. And at the heart of this is actually dietary interventions. Next slide. So as very exciting news, hot off the press, actually last month, the National Kidney Foundation released its most updated nutritional management guidelines for chronic kidney disease, advance. And I want to highlight that Dr. Kalantar, my longstanding mentor and division chief, actually led a very important commentary as one of the past presidents of the International Society of Renal Nutrition and Metabolism on these guidelines. Next slide. So one of the most important recommendations coming out of these guidelines for patients with diabetic kidney disease and without diabetes is that for patients who are not yet on dialysis, it's very important to have a modification of protein intake, a lower protein intake, as Dr. Kalantar highlighted. So specifically, we want patients to have 0.6 to 0.8 grams per kilo per day. Next slide. The American Diabetes Association, American Society of Nephrology, and National Kidney Foundation also emphasize vegan protein sources and low protein diet and non-fat. Next slide. And in the US, high protein diets are very popular as a means to lose weight loss. And also there's some thought that it may help with diabetes. Next slide. However, as Dr. Kalantar underscored, there are many harmful effects of high protein intake in diabetic kidney disease. It causes the kidney to filter more. The kidney is like a coffee filter. It causes more pressure in the kidney. And then this ultimately leads to damage to the kidneys and kidney failure. Next slide. As Dr. Kalantar also highlighted, the source of protein is important in diabetic patients with kidney disease. So plant-based diets have a lot of benefits, like reducing the risk of diabetes and better glucose control, lowering body mass index, and also controlling high blood pressure. Next slide. And at this time, there are not per se specific guidelines for carbohydrate intake in patients with diabetes and kidney disease. Advanced. One very important point I want to highlight is that in contrast to diabetes patients without kidney disease, a high protein diet should not be used in diabetic kidney disease patients as a way to reduce carbohydrate intake. So again, we don't want diabetic kidney disease patients to be having high protein intake. Next slide. Dietary fiber is an important type of carbohydrate found in plant foods. It has a lot of health benefits. Next slide. And in a recent study that was led by one of my postdoctoral fellows, Dr. Yoko Narasaki, that is soon going to be published, she found that having lower dietary fiber intake was actually associated with higher death risk in patients both with and without kidney disease. Next slide. With respect to fat, the American Diabetes Association recommends avoiding saturated trans fat cholesterol and recommends more consumption of monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fat, and omega-3 fatty acids. Next slide. And there's also been growing popularity of dietary patterns and prescribed diets, such as the DASH diet. So the DASH diet is a diet that's been approved by the US government for hypertension, but it also lowers risk of diabetes, improves blood glucose levels and cholesterol levels. Next slide. So in summary, when we approach nutritional management in diabetic kidney disease, we really want to use a food pyramid in which we have less dietary protein intake, we have less saturated fatty acid and trans fat intake, and more polyunsaturated fatty acids and monounsaturated fatty acids. We want to have adequate nutrition intake, and we want to have less sugar-based foods and more low glycemic foods like fibers, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. So thank you so much for attending this lecture and this symposium, and it's really an honor to be able to I think serve the Orange County and Greater Southern California kidney disease community through the work that we're doing. And next slide. So it's my honor and pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce my very a brilliant and highly accomplished colleague, Dr. Wei-Ling Lau. So Dr. Wei-Ling Lau is a long-standing UCI alum. She has trained at some of the most, I think, world-renowned centers, I think, across the nation. But we are very proud that she's a homegrown, I think, UC Irvine nephrologist as well. And she has led many prestigious government-funded research studies and is also a superb clinician. So she'll be talking to you on gut microbiome, prebiotics and probiotics, and kidney health, a very hot topic. Thank you, Dr. Lau.
Thank you, Dr. Rhee. That's a very kind introduction. So like Dr. Rhee, I am a clinician scientist. I study the interaction between the kidney, the gut, and the brain with a particular interest in brain microbleeds, which we know predict early dementia as well as stroke in kidney disease patients. I'm also studying potassium binders and their use in the emergency room, and collaborating with artificial intelligence specialists at UCI to see how we can use AI to help us diagnose kidney disease. Next slide. So I'll be touching upon the gut microbiome and why it's so important in kidney disease. So the gut actually has 100 trillion bacteria, which is 10-fold greater than the number of cells in the entire human body. The microbiome has 3.3 million genes, which is 150-fold bigger than the human genome. So it's really not surprising that the gut bacteria help to shape our health and disease states, especially in the infant, for example. The gut bacteria help to form local as well as systemic immunity. And it's just interesting to note that as you go from the esophagus to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the colon, the oxygen concentration decreases and the number and diversity of bacteria increases. So typically when we talk about the microbiome and health, we're thinking about the colon bacteria and having a thriving and healthy or beneficial colon and bacterial population. Next slide. So what happens in chronic kidney disease? And I'll just also mention that dysbiosis or alterations in the gut bacteria have now been implicated in many disease states. So not just chronic kidney disease, but diabetes, heart disease, dementia, asthma, cancers. The byproducts of gut bacterial metabolism has been shown to really play a role in a lot of disease conditions. But we think this is what the schematic is in kidney disease, because when the kidneys aren't working well and you're not getting rid of waste products, so metabolic waste products, these build up in the blood system and they actually diffuse into the gut, so the lumen of the intestine. So this sort of is like a selection pressure. It's selecting for bacteria that can thrive in the setting of these waste products, so specific bacterial populations increase. And unfortunately, these are the types of bacteria that can produce certain toxins that can damage different organ systems and cause more inflammation in the body. And these toxins are things like indoxyl sulfate, p-cressyl sulfate, trimethylamine, N oxide. At the same time, traditionally at least, we kind of tell people when they have kidney disease, be careful with foods that have potassium or phosphorus. So this is not good for the gut bacteria because, number one, when you try and be careful with potassium foods, that means you're not getting good vegetables and fruits, not getting enough fiber. And fiber is really important for a healthy microbiome. Number two, when you're being careful with phosphorus foods, it's like cheese, yogurts, and those are the types of foods that expose you to good beneficial bacteria. So unfortunately, the kidney diet doesn't provide enough fiber, and you might not be getting good symbiotic beneficial bacteria in the diet. And this further promotes changes in the healthy gut microbiome. So then the altered gut microbiome doesn't produce enough short-chain fatty acids because they're not fermenting enough fiber. Short-chain fatty acids are very good for our health. It keeps the health of the colon cells. It modulates appetite as well as how we spend energy in the body. And then it impairs the overall impairment of the barrier, the healthy barrier of the gut. So now bacterial DNA and bacterial products and toxins can move from the inside of the gut lumen into the bloodstream. And then it circulates, it causes vascular injury, and then promotes all the things I mentioned earlier, kidney injury, diabetes, heart disease, even brain injury. Next slide, please. And this is just a slide just showing, summarizing all the different organ systems that can be affected with these toxins that are coming from the gut. So it likely plays a role, for example, in why when you have kidney disease, you have an impaired immune system, because these gut-derived toxins are impairing white blood cell function. These toxins are probably promoting the anemia that we see in kidney disease, promoting abnormal bone turnover, and then, as I mentioned, impairing vascular function and promoting atherosclerotic heart disease, as well as progression of kidney damage. And one of the studies we have ongoing at UCI that's funded by the NIH is looking at how these gut toxins affect vascular health in the brain and affect microbleeds formation. Next slide, please. So since we're still trying to find what the optimal diet is to promote the best health in chronic kidney disease, there's been a lot of interest in, can we supplement the diet with things that can promote a healthy microbiome and try and slow kidney disease progression. So prebiotics is basically fiber that you can take as part of the supplemented diet that can promote the growth of good bacteria. Good bacteria ferment fiber to produce short-chain fatty acids, which are again very beneficial for health. Probiotics is supplementing directly live bacteria to try and populate the gut with a more healthy bacterial population. And then symbiotics combine the two, prebiotics and probiotics, into the supplement. Next slide. So here's a study I wanted to mention. Dr. Vaziri is one of our faculty at UCI, and he had a collaborative study with some nephrologists in Iran that was published in Hemodialysis International a couple of years ago, where they supplemented fiber, and this was a particular fiber called high amylose resistant starch. So it reaches the colon undigested, and then the colon bacteria can ferment it. And they found that when these hemodialysis patients were given this fiber, and I think it was for 6 weeks, there was decrease in blood inflammatory markers, although they didn't note changes in some other markers such as CRP or total antioxidant activity, but there was a signal for benefit. And there was also less constipation in these patients, and constipation can be a very bothersome symptom in the dialysis population. Next slide. In terms of probiotics, very recently, there was a trial published this year in peritoneal dialysis patients that showed that taking a probiotic, I think, and this one was for 2 months, I believe, it decreased inflammation and improved blood albumin, which is a very important predictor of good outcomes in dialysis patients. Interestingly, there's another formulation you may hear about because it's marketed directly to kidney patients called Renadil. And the company that made Renadil, they reported a decade ago that they noticed some improved quality of life scores when they gave the Renadil probiotic to kidney disease patients who were not on dialysis. But when they tested it in hemodialysis patients, they did not find a benefit. So we're not quite sure why there was a difference in probiotics looking at hemodialysis versus peritoneal dialysis patients. Maybe being on hemodialysis, you have a higher inflamed state, or maybe the two types of dialysis, they have different makeup in the bacterial populations. But certainly more work is needed here. Next slide. And then we've only had one study that used symbiotics in chronic kidney disease. This was a study done in Australia and New Zealand that was published 4 years ago. And symbiotic therapy in these non-dialysis participants who had chronic kidney disease decreased levels of some toxins, but it didn't change quality of life scores or other inflammatory markers. So it's disappointing, but I think it just highlights that we need to do more work to really understand what's the right combination of prebiotics and probiotics for our kidney patients. Next slide. So to summarize, we now have over a decade of research showing that the gut microbiome is significantly altered when you have chronic kidney disease. And this shift in the bacterial population from fermenting carbohydrates to fermenting more protein or amino acids produces toxins, and these toxins move across this leaky gut and cause vascular injury and multi-organ damage, including increasing risk for heart disease, diabetes, and progression of kidney disease. And so far, we've found some beneficial signs with using prebiotics and probiotics, some beneficial impact. But overall, how these impact long-term progression and clinical outcomes of interest with patients, do they feel better, have less symptoms, maintain their kidney function for a longer period, that's still unclear. So it's really a field that's of a lot of interest and a lot of active research ongoing. All right. So now I'm going to move on and introduce the next speaker. So Ms. Sherry Schulman is a registered dietitian with the Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute and a partner to our nephrology division. She has a master's in nutrition and is going to be speaking on anti-inflammatory foods to improve health span for chronic kidney disease.
Well, hello. I'm very grateful and honored to be part of this presentation today. Next. So let's talk about inflammation. Acute inflammation protects you from harm. It's the body's immune system reacting to trauma or infection. We basically need this kind of active acute inflammation. What we don't need chronic inflammation. This is the progressive increase in pro-inflammatory status. It's known as inflammation. Next. So what contributes to smoldering inflammation? Poor diet. So let's talk about that. Next. Can changing your eating habits today improve overall health? Absolutely. Fun fact, 70% of our immune system resides in our gut. Next. Triggers for inflammation include sugar, refined flour, ultra-processed foods, inflammatory fats such as trans fats, saturated fats, food allergens and sensitivities. Very sad. Yeah, it's the standard American diet. Next. So let's hydrate. Your body is about 60% water. This lets your kidneys excrete the toxins, blood, urea, nitrogen, and also lowers the risk of kidney stones. Water, tea, and coffee are all fluids, and they count, and are anti-inflammatory. Next. Well, why do we need protein? Well, we must obtain essential amino acids through our food. We can't make essential amino acids, and nor can we store protein. Every cell in our body contains protein. Next. Well, we all know this, 50% of all protein that we consume should be plant-based. Plant-based protein with all 9 essential amino acids include quinoa, soy, edamame, tofu, your fermented soy tempeh, buckwheat, hemp seed, chia seed, spirulina, which is a blue-green algae, and amaranth. All of these have anti-inflammatory phytochemicals. Next, let's just stop that fear of fats. Fats became demonized in the 50s and 60s, but in 2015, US dietary guidelines softened their view on reducing fats and officially removed limits on dietary cholesterol. Essential fatty acids cannot be synthesized within the human body and therefore must be obtained through the diet, such as fatty fish. Essential fatty acids promote heart health, protect your brain, fight depression, relieve inflammation, lower blood pressure, and joint pain. They help you absorb all your fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K. And fat controls sugar spikes for diabetics. Next. I focus on the smash fish. These are your salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardine, and herring. Why? They're low mercury. They both contain EPA and DHA, and together, DHA and EPA help reduce inflammation and your risk of chronic diseases. DHA supports the brain function and eye health. Next. But of course, we also want to include nuts, seeds, avocados, and olive oil. Next. Keto diet, paleo diet, Atkins diet, Lindora diet all say carbs are bad. Well, I 100% disagree on that one. Carbohydrates are abundant in foods. Next. Your whole grain, your legumes, your fruits, your vegetables. Whole foods are rich in fiber. So what do I want you to do next? Next. I want you to eliminate simple refined carbohydrates, which quickly break down to glucose in your body. This spikes your insulin. Basically, this builds fat. Next. Plant foods contain thousands of natural chemicals, phytonutrients or phytochemicals. Phyto is a Greek word for plants. These chemicals help protect plants from germs, fungus, bugs, and other threats. Phytochemicals are not essential like vitamins and minerals, but can help in the prevention of disease. Well, what's the difference? Antioxidants, phytochemicals. Okay, let's think about oxidation. As the rust on a car, the color of an apple after it's been cut open, or an avocado if you leave it out in the air. Antioxidants. These are substances that prevent this damage to cells from highly reactive, unstable molecules. These are called free radicals. Next. Vitamins and minerals from our foods are essential to our health. Number one, we have billions of chemical reactions that take place in our body each second. Next. These reactions take enzymes. So in order for these reactions to take place, we need vitamins and minerals as the coenzyme. Next. Okay, I'm getting sad now. Only 8 out of 10 Americans do not eat enough color. Not red, not purple, not green, not white, not orange, yellow. So we have some goals to reach here, and including more fruits and vegetables in our diet. Next. Spices are powerful antioxidants. The American Kidney Foundation promotes the use of spices to enhance the flavor of our food, and also it reduces our salt intake. Studies show that cinnamon may help in inflammation. Studies also show that garlic may lower your chances of getting heart disease. Ginger, well, yes, ginger can really help with an upset stomach since it's got anti-inflammatory properties. Next. Probiotics are fermented foods. Next. We have yogurt, we have kefir, we have unpasteurized cheese, and fermented vegetables. The type of fermentation that makes most foods probiotic is lactic acid fermentation. Good bacteria convert the sugar molecules in the food into lactic acid. Well, now the bacteria are able to multiply and proliferate. Probiotic benefits are only present in unpasteurized foods pickled in brine, not vinegar. So fun fact, Chinese have been fermenting vegetables for over 6,000 years. Next. Thank you. I've enjoyed speaking with everybody today. And your body is a temple, but only if you treat it as one. Next. I am now very proud to introduce my colleague and also friend, Dr. Amanda Brown. Today, as another registered dietitian, she will be speaking about plant-based protein and fiber for kidney health.
Thank you, Sherry, for that. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Next slide. So, based on the literature surrounding kidney health, 2 important recommendations have been made regarding dietary protein intake, as everyone else has already mentioned. But the first recommendation is to consume a low protein diet consisting of 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And it's been suggested that this level of protein intake can slow the progression of CKD. So for example, a 70 kilogram or 154 pound adult would eat about 42 to 56 grams of protein per day. And the term low is mostly referring to protein intake relative to the typical amount of protein consumed by Americans. The recommended dietary allowance for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. However, most Americans consume much more than that. The second recommendation is that at least half of the protein intake should come from plant-based sources. I'd like to emphasize that whole foods, plant-based sources are best. I know there are a lot of meat substitutes and plant-based proteins out there, but sticking to whole foods will provide the greatest benefit. And one great advantage of eating plant proteins is that in addition to consuming protein, you're also consuming fiber, which I'll also be discussing. You're also eating healthy complex carbohydrates, healthy fats such as omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and various vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. Next slide. Next, I'll discuss some of the literature supporting why there's an emphasis specifically on consuming plant-based proteins. So a group of nearly 12,000 middle-aged adults were followed over 23 years to see who would develop CKD. The researchers found that consuming a diet high in red meat and processed meat increased participants' risk of CKD. However, there was a lower risk of CKD in those whose diets included nuts, legumes, and low-fat dairy. A review of literature highlights that cholesterol is an independent risk factor in the development and progression of CKD. Note that cholesterol is only found in animal protein and it does not exist in plants. Dietary data from over 3,000 women followed for 14 years show that those who had the highest intake of animal fat and at least 2 servings of red meat per week had greater risk of microalbuminuria. One of the ways in which animal protein may be detrimental to the kidneys is by increasing acid load and ammonia production. Over time, chronic meat ingestion may lead to decreased kidney function. And interestingly, animal-based protein can increase GFR. However, a similar amount of plant-based protein does not. Next. Here are some ideas for good sources of plant-based protein. As I previously mentioned, you want to focus on whole food sources. There are 5 main sources of plant-based protein, and they include legumes or beans, and in some areas they're called pulses. Also whole grains, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. I won't go through the entire list, but after the webinar, you'll have access to this list so you can take a look. Next slide. Next, I'll discuss the benefits of fiber for kidney health. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate found only in plants, and it's indigestible by humans. It is, however, metabolized by microbes within the gut. The American Dietetic Association recommends that adult women have at least 25 grams of fiber per day, and adult men have at least 38 grams per day. If you currently don't have a lot of fiber in your diet, which many Americans typically do not, then I would recommend slowly incorporating more fiber into your diet. For example, add 1 fiber-rich food or meal per day and wait at least a few days or even a week or so before trying to add more. Also, make sure you drink plenty of water throughout the day because certain types of fiber can create a lot of bulk in your gut, and the water will help to move this bulk along through your digestive tract. Next. In the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, data from over 14,000 people in the general population was analyzed to look for any associations between fiber intake, inflammation markers, and all-cause mortality. What they found was that among those with CKD, those with the highest intakes of dietary fiber had the lowest risks of inflammation and all-cause mortality. One way that fiber is advantageous in kidney disease is that increased fiber intake can support the growth of the healthy bacteria within our guts and consequently reduce uremic toxins. Fiber can also increase bowel transit, which may improve electrolyte imbalances. So just think about a bowel where there may be constipation. So the longer the fecal matter stays within the gut, the more time there is for nutrients such as potassium to be absorbed. But in CKD, we want to reduce conditions that promote potassium absorption. Next slide. Here's a list of some great sources of dietary fiber. Some of these you'll notice were also in the list of plant-based sources of protein. And you'll see that once you start incorporating more plants into your daily diet, it's quite easy to get to the recommended amount. And again, you'll be able to look at this list after the webinar. Next slide. Now I know with all of these plant foods, you may be wondering about specific nutrients such as phosphorus and potassium. So I wanted to touch on this. And as I previously emphasized, it's best to focus on intake of whole foods because research indicates, for example, that only about 20 to 40% of phosphorus gets absorbed from plants. However, nearly 100% of phosphorus from food additives and preservatives is absorbed. To know whether or not there are phosphorus and or potassium additives in your food, you have to read the nutrition facts label and look at the ingredients list. The nutrition facts label typically won't tell you the quantity of phosphorus or potassium, but you can see if it's in the food product. And I would say it's probably best to just avoid foods that contain ingredients that may say something like phosphorus, phosphate, or potassium added in the ingredients list. Next slide. And then lastly, I wanted to leave you with some ideas for easy meals you can incorporate to increase your intake of plant-based proteins and fiber. So first, we have a breakfast bowl that contains oatmeal, or you can use some other type of whole grains such as buckwheat. Also, flax seeds are great, and make sure they're ground so that you can reap the benefits of them. Almonds are great, or any other type of nut. And you may also want to include some type of fruit such as banana slices or berries. Next slide. Another great meal with plant-based proteins and rich in fiber is a fiesta bowl, which you could include your favorite type of lettuce, like a romaine lettuce, black beans, cilantro, corn, pico de gallo, or also add a cilantro lime dressing. And perhaps you can make your own dressing or look for a dressing that doesn't contain added phosphorus or potassium. Next slide. And finally, another kidney-friendly meal would be pasta salad with whole wheat pasta, veggies such as broccoli, peas, and carrots, and a dressing such as extra virgin olive oil and balsamic vinegar. And you can top it with a pinch of salt, pepper, and garlic. And next slide. So after the webinar, you'll also have access to a great video that Sherry created. She made a wonderful plant-based protein meal, and you'll be able to take a look at that. And that's it for me, and I'll pass it back to Dr. Kalantar.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Dr. Waylin Law. And thank you, Dr. Connie Reed. For colleagues who are listening to us and watching these great presentations, I personally have learned a lot. And I'm sure that some of you, if not all of you, have found these presentations quite fascinating. It's amazing that you go to other kidney centers, other dietitians, they may tell you actually the opposite. My patients, for example, sometimes say that, look, we look up in Google or we go to this or that dietitian nephrologist, they tell us not to exactly eat what you're telling us. It's all about high potassium, hyperkalemia. And I say that, look, that's why you're here. That's why you are coming to UCI, Center of Excellence in Kidney Disease and Kidney Health. That's why you chose here. That's why you're flying here. You're staying in these hotels to see us as compared to going to somebody in New York or in Minnesota. So nothing, as I said, so I don't want to make it about bragging because it should be in real world scenario. And some of you are our patients. They have noticed how dedicated our colleagues are our nephrologists, our dietitians. Now, I would like just to mention that we have Miss Jennifer Stadenbauer here with us. She represents advancement. Philanthropy is vital to research and care we provide to UCI Health. Philanthropy supports students through scholarships. It supports our mentees who are now great, amazing nephrologists and dietitians, as you can see. It allows us to recruit world-class dietitians, nephrologists, people who you cannot find even in New York or Mayo Clinic. When you go to Mayo Clinic, you would be surprised that they invite us to give them lectures, to teach them. It's amazing. Funds are essentially funds that are shared with us. They enable groundbreaking basic science, translational research, and expands our clinical care space. Our UCI is expanding massively. Soon we're going to have our second hospital, and the entire Orange County will become essentially a medical tourism hub. We hope that you are inspired why we're doing. This is a great care in Orange County that we have. I'm going to stop here, and since we have a few minutes left, we are going to go over some of the questions. Now, I wonder who's going to read the questions and where they are.
I can read those for you, Dr. Kalantar, and team. So we have a few questions come through. I'll just start at the top. What is normal intraglomerular pressure?
Yeah, the intraglomerular pressure, there is a pressure unit for that. But instead of saying what the pressure is, we say the consequence of pressure, which is filtration. Now, you may think glomerular filtration high is good, but guess what? Like everything else, too high is bad. You remember my slides about too high, which is we call it hyperfiltration. When you go to this nephrologist, that endocrinologist, that dietitian, and say that, look, eat a lot of meat, keto diet, and lose weight, and don't get diabetes, actually, guess what? Not infrequently, our patients have been with us for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Suddenly they go to these dietitians, endocrinologists, and they eat a lot of high protein to lose weight, and within 3 months they need dialysis. So you increase your intraglomerular, you increase GFR. It's like a car that is just running so well, but then somebody says, oh, just go and race on highway with that. But guess what? Then after that, there's nothing left from the car. So please be careful. So therefore, too high glomerular filtration rate is not good. Any other comments about this?
Not about that specifically, but the next question is, what are your thoughts on kidney support supplements, such as Kidney Correct by Designs for Health? Would this have any effect after the patient has already started hemodialysis?
So let me ask Dr. Lau and then.
Yeah, so I can just comment on it. I just looked it up real fast because I was not familiar with the ingredients, but it sounds like it has extracts from mushroom, fungus, astragalus, and ginseng. So again, certainly before Western style medicine, Eastern medicine has been looking at different herbs and supplements and potential benefits on different organ systems for many years. And, I tell patients, I'm not discounting all that traditional medicine and things that people have been trying out for a long, long time. I would just advise that you monitor your kidney function with your nephrologist closely if you are trying it. And then the National Kidney Foundation has a very helpful website with herbal supplements that have been associated with dangerous electrolyte problems like high potassium. So it's always good to just check on that website and make sure it's not on the blacklist in terms of the ingredients. But in general, if you've found encouraging, reports of its use, I say try it. Just monitor the kidney function again with your physician. And then that's a good question about being on dialysis already. I think most of us would agree that if you still have some kidney function, you're still making some urine, then there might still be some benefit. But if you're no longer producing urine, probably any potential benefit on the kidneys is not going to be relevant.
Thank you, Dr. Lau. Any thoughts on screening for environmental toxins and what effects they can have on CKD progression?
Yeah, let me ask maybe Dr. Connie Reed, any suggestions about screening for environmental toxin? I just can say that, yes, we can do these things, but not infrequently. There are many other things, and not infrequently, the cause of kidney disease is almost unknown in over half. Dr. Reed.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Counter. Yeah, so as an epidemiologist, I would say this is a very kind of hot and I think emerging area. I think we're definitely, recognizing that there are environmental exposures that increase risk of chronic kidney disease, ranging from anything from pollution to even heat. And we live in a really, heat-centric environment. Actually, UCI is a major hub for research in this area as well. We have I think a very I think reputable and well-renowned environmental sciences department. That being said, I think it's important to note that dietary issues can synergize with environmental toxin exposure. So although there's still a lot we're trying to understand with it, all these things can act together to cause harm to the kidney. If there's multiple hits. But I think at this time, there's still a lot more research that is actively underway, I think, in this area.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there diet recommendations for hemodialysis patients? I was told that a higher protein diet was needed and to avoid food like avocado and whole grain nuts, etc. And I think too, what might be helpful is, where can some of these patients go as a next step from this to get, nutrition tips and experts or get that one-on-one coaching?
Let me also ask Dr. Amanda Brown to say something, but let me just add something that I have under my direct care, around 50 patients on hemodialysis and home dialysis. And it's sad that most dialysis centers do not allow patients to eat during dialysis. It's terrible. In fact, a lot of, most nephrologists, they say, don't eat this, don't eat that. And then at the end, it's all about a lot of things that is not allowed, such as banana, avocado. I pass out food during dialysis rounds. And I'm famous for that, whereas the rest of the nation, or many, this is what we do. That's why we innovate nephrology here. And then the rest of the nation follow UCI model. Now, Dr. Amanda Brown, for example, has had interactions with dialysis patients. And there are things, and Dr. Brown looked at the source of phosphorus instead of telling people don't eat a lot of meat or cheese or other things, because on dialysis, you really need more protein, and there is a lot of good sources of also plant-based protein. Dr. Brown and others are looking at the bad sources of phosphorus, such as, Dr. Brown, why don't you add to that?
Yeah, sure. So the recommendations that we all gave today for low protein diet, that's for someone that's pre-dialysis. When you're on dialysis, you want to have high protein. And so in terms of avoiding foods such as avocado and whole grains, I just want to relate it back to what I said before about focusing on whole foods, because I think all of us, if you're eating anything in a package, it most likely has some type of added phosphorus in it, and we don't even realize. Like I showed a nutrition facts label of Cheerios, which may seem really harmless, but it has those added, it has added phosphorus to it. And the problem with it is that almost 100% of it is absorbed. Whereas with plant foods, only like a small portion, 20 to 40% of the phosphorus is getting absorbed. So it's not as much. And so it's really like a case-by-case basis, and you'll have to discuss with your dietitian, maybe you can have whole grains, but just a smaller amount, So yeah, it's really about individualizing your approach. So eating whole foods so that you're getting the benefit, but just monitoring your serum phosphorus levels.
Great.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ms. Steinbauer, maybe one more question about anything about diet for Ms. Sherry Schulman.
Let me see here. There's one more. I also want to be respectful of time, so we'll do one more question. So there is a question about, is meat-based protein all the same, or is red meat and white meat, turkey, chicken all the same?
So before I let Ms. Sherry Schulman talk about this thing, so that you know, Ms. Sherry Schulman and Dr. Amanda Brown, they are based in Susan Samueli Institute for and Integrative Medicine. That's an amazing source for everybody in Orange County. And Ms. Sherry Schulman, so what do you think, what is your comments about this question?
Well, I think if we kind of look at life maybe a little bit more on the pescatarian side, we do need essential amino acids. Basically, in America, we do eat too much protein. I would focus on some of the lighter meats. I'd also focus on things that offer that brain health, that EPA, that DHA that we can't get from most of our red meat. Red meat, when we do digest it, there are certain toxic chemicals that are converted within our body that's more stressful on our kidneys, more stressful on our heart. So I would start off saying 50% are from that plant-based source. Now we know what the 9 different essential amino acids are and which plant-based sources. We include, just as Dr. Brown said, all fruits, vegetables, whole foods. Make a challenge to yourself. Go to the store and try something different. Average American eats basically somewhere around 15 to 20 different foods per day and rarely change out of it. So go to the produce section and go challenge yourself and start looking at things that are lower mercury fish, because that's also a toxin. We don't want to have any kind of heavy metals in our system that can actually do damage to either our heart or our kidneys or our vascular system.
Wow, so nicely said. So as you notice, I would like also to disclose that this is a diverse group of clinicians and dietitians. We are not here to force you to become vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, or only eat meat, or not only eat meat. Each of us, we have our own preferences. For example, I tell my patients that I'm not vegan or vegetarian. Actually, I eat fish, and I want you to eat what you like. We're here for you. We don't have any agenda. If you do great, you live longer, your kidney lasts longer, I become even more famous. So then I have selfish reason for you to do great. And then they always laugh, like Sherry just did. They smile, and I like it, because this is what we do. That's why we are for you here. So we are running out of time. I just wanted again to emphasize Ms. Jen Stadenbauer may reach out to you. And if you're interested in helping us, in getting more involved, in learning more about how you can make an impact in the future of healthcare and kidney health at UCI Health, so please work with her. I would like to thank you all for a great, for enabling us to work with you and to present this to you. And I wish you the best. Jen, do you have anything else you would like to say?
Yeah, so for anybody that did have a question we did not have time to address, we will get back to you. We'll pull a report, and I'll work with the team to make sure we get responses to your questions. But if you do think of something after this, feel free to shoot me an email too. I have it listed on this slide. We will also be sending out a quick survey after the event, as well as a link to the recording of the presentation and the slides. So you'll have access to the videos and all the content that you saw today. And as well, you know, if in light of continued physical distancing still in place, if there are other topics that you'd like to see in this virtual format, please do let me know. Thank you so much again for joining us, everybody.
Great. Thank you. Have a nice day, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.